And welcome, Sonejuhi Sinha. Is that how you say it? I just always want to make sure it's right.
Yeah, you actually said it correctly. Sonejuhi Sinha, that's
hmm
right.
I get the last name thing, like being from like my last name is so Scandinavian that Scandinavians can barely pronounce it. So I get the struggle.
How do you say it?
Ditlevsen?
Oh, wow.
hmm Yeah.
Itlefson.
hmm
That's great.
Okay.
Just to get started, do you want to just talk about how you began in the industry?
Sure. So I went to William and Mary as an English major. Went to college to become a writer, but sort of fell in love with film. I was also a dual film studies major as well. So sort of watched all the auteurs and really fell in love with the art form. So I knew that when I graduated, I actually combined my studies at Tisch as well and did a bit of film production there. But as I graduated, I knew I wanted to, make films one day, be involved in it. And my way into the whole field was actually through editing. I became an assistant editor at an international company that actually started in the UK. And then I made my way to an editor there. And then, as an editor, got to work with some great directors, including Spike Jonze and Harmony Korine, and really got to sort of learn sitting across from them as an editor and, seeing the footage that they had shot and really sort of learning storytelling by being an editor. So that was really my foundation into storytelling. And then about 6, 7 years ago, I started to write and direct my own short films while I was still editing. And one of my early short films premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. So that was an incredible experience to be there because they're so selective and they only choose 10 films out of thousands of submissions. So once I was there, that's when I really started to think about how to grow storytelling and how to really get into long form and write a feature script. So that's when I started to write Stray Dolls, which was really kind of an expansion of one of the short films I had shot, the one that played at Cannes. So started to expand the world in a motel, expand the characters, expand the themes and sort of really think about themes and what was relevant happening in America at the time too, because Trump was just elected. So all of that was part of the journey into Stray Dolls.
Hmm. With editing, how do you think that affects the way that you write and direct now? Maybe particularly editing documentaries, because that is so much about creating that narrative that has been filmed over such a long time.
Exactly. I mean, I think, editing documentaries is one of the hardest things I have done. It's one of the hardest things I think people do. I think, when you begin shooting a documentary, you're really just grabbing everything you can get. There's no script usually. I mean, you're lucky if you have a treatment and a character, but it really all has to come together and has to be written in the edit. So, in the edit, you're selecting the character that's going to take you on a journey. You are selecting the story arc. You're creating act 1, act 2, act 3 from 400 hours of footage, maybe more, and you're really creating each scene and how each scene leads from one to the next. So it's exhaustive. Documentary editing can take from a couple of months to years. I mean, some documentaries I edited over 10 years. And some screenplays I've written over 10 years. So it's really the construction of story that takes place in the edit room. And it's a really, I think it's a really critical process and became my sort of doorway into the writing, directing process. And I bring my editing eye to set all the time because I'm constantly thinking about, well, how is the scene going to cut? Am I going to start on the wide, or is the scene all about this close-up? And so I really try to be very economical and efficient with my choices on set and with my time on set, because I've already sort of processed, like, well, this is not needed, this is not needed. If I have time, I'll get this, but it's not the core of, you know, what the scene really is, or what the story really is, or what we need from this character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I recommend, yeah, for any young filmmaker to edit, maybe not their own work. Sometimes it's really hard to edit your own work, because it kind of feels like you're doing surgery on yourself, because at least I'm really self-critical. So it's always great to work with an editor, but I recommend, you know, editing other people's work, so you can really tell, like, you know, maybe they should have shot a close-up here, because this scene is all about, you know, the emotional beat needs to be communicated in a close-up, and it's not here. And so really understanding, like, what is needed to construct a scene, an emotion, something that's gonna, you know, carry the audience from one to the next, and how to really let an emotional beat land with an audience.
It's something, having editing in mind while I write, something I've been much more conscious of in this year, because I remember watching a Beyond the Screenplay video on YouTube about a Parasite script. And apparently in Korea, it's very common to write in the editing in your script. So it's all written with the purpose, like it's all collective, like editing isn't just post-production, it is within it. So that's something I've been paying attention to so much lately. And it really just benefits me so much, because I'm like, oh, I need to, like, this makes such a difference, actually having the full image and knowing where you want the different shots to be and the different impact, the emotions, all of that. Yeah.
And also in terms of pace, like, you know, is the scene supposed to be really, like, fast, you know, so then if you know that scene's going to be really fast, then in the directing process, you're telling your actors and performers to, like, you know, you're going to rush into this room, you're going to do this and that. Like, I think it just affects your whole pace on set if you know that the pace in the edit is going to be really fast, or like the scene is really slow, you know, we're going to really hone in on this emotion and we're going to go slow here. And so then you can craft a performance as you're directing that, you know, sort of really creates a pace that you're going to later, you know, that you can later shape in the edit, but the more you know about the end, the better you are in the beginning.
Well, I was wondering, with each project, how do you come up with the idea, especially with your short film, Love Comes Later? How did you come up with that idea, and why did you think it was important to tell that story?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I was doing I knew I wanted to make a short film, and I knew I wanted to sort of take inspiration from true stories and true immigrant stories. So I was doing a bit of research. I was volunteering at a shelter in New York that rehabilitates women who've been sexually assaulted and women who've been trafficked. And so I was volunteering with those women and sort of helping them, you know, build their lives up again and, you know, get back in looking into jobs and sort of prepare them for the real world again. And so I was trying to immerse myself in a lot of true stories so that I could sort of take inspiration from one of those true stories and build a narrative, create a fictional narrative that was sort of inspired by, you know, what these women go through who are undocumented in America. So the kernel started there, and then I loved the idea of shooting at an American motel because the setting is so, I think, iconic and cinematic, and it's been used in, you know, in cinema by auteurs, American auteurs, since the 60s, 70s, and it's this, you know, iconic American institution. You know, the neon I find really visually stunning and exciting. So I was looking into like how to make these real stories work within motels, and you know, a lot of motels are owned by Indian Americans in the U.S. and Indian immigrants in the U.S. because motels were going into foreclosure in the 70s, and Indian immigrants were immigrating then, and there was so much discrimination that they couldn't find jobs, so they ended up taking these motels and sort of reviving them and reviving these foreclosed motels. So I thought there was something there with that setting. It was a whole world. And then, you know, take inspiration from true stories and create something there. So that was what I sort of kept coming back to. I get a lot of ideas and I sort of write everything down, but the idea that sort of sticks and the one that I keep coming back to is the one that, you know, kind of starts to just expand organically on its own. So I wrote a 10-minute short film. It was all set in a motel with 3 characters. I wanted to keep it simple. I think both for economic reasons and, you know, the economy of a short film, which is only 10 minutes, I sort of wanted to really focus in on one character and one simple journey that character goes through. So yeah, hopefully that answered some of that question.
And when
Stop me from talking if you need to. Yeah.
When you are writing your characters, do you write with representation in mind, or does it just happen that way? Yeah.
So write with people in mind or actors in mind, or?
No. So do you write characters and cast people with like diversity at the front of your mind, or does it just naturally happen that way? As I know, your films are quite diverse in their casting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of happens organically. I don't try to be too prescribed about that process. I think that sort of happens organically, but that goes to show us that, you know, that's why we need so many more, you know, writers and directors who are women and women of color and, you know, different kinds of people, because I think, you know, for decades, like white men have been dominating Hollywood and the film industry, and therefore we kind of see the same stories over and over again, and we see the same casting over and over again. And I think when you just allow for different voices to you know, to make their way through, you just organically start to see different casting that you didn't see before, or LGBTQ stories, or, you know, I just think we need all these other stories so desperately now. We're sort of at a point of crisis when it comes to, you know, storytelling and also other things. But yeah, I think it's so important, like who tells the story and who's in control of telling that story, because conscious and unconscious decisions get made, and those reflect, you know, that trickles down to the audience, and that trickles down to representation and what the audience can, you know, see themselves in, and the stories they can see themselves in.
Yeah, we've said previously on this podcast that, like you just said, to have diversity in front of the camera, you need it behind, and you're just a prime example of that. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
And so obviously, when it was selected for Cannes, how was that feeling? I mean, that is pretty huge.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience. We actually only applied to Cannes. It was the first festival we applied to, and we got in. So it was kind of just this incredible feeling, and the doors that sort of opened from there on, because it just, I mean, mainly, to be honest, for myself, because I think I could start taking myself more seriously as a writer director and not just an editor. So I think it was a bit of a turning point just for me to sort of remind myself to invest in that side as well, and invest time in, you know, the stories that I went to school wanting to tell, but had sort of taken the back seat all the years that I'd been editing. So.
Yeah, I mean, go big or go home. Um, so when you started working on Stray Dolls, I know that you were a producer on it as well. Was that important for you? I think it's something not a lot of people are maybe that encouraged to be on their own movies, but that is really where you get that say in the production of it. So how was that a very important decision for you?
You know, I initially went into thinking that the producing was not going to be an important decision. All I needed to find were, you know, producers who were going to support me and support the story and fall in love with it the way that I loved, you know, in the same way that I loved the story so much. But the more that I started to, you know, develop the film and work with people, I started to realize exactly what you're saying, that, you know, as a producer, you have a lot of say. You have a say on the final editorial cut, the final cut. You get a vote. A lot of times, even on smaller independent films, if a producing team comes in or a financing team comes in, they won't let the director have the final cut, even on a first independent film. So I thought that that vote was really important. Then as a producer, you get a vote on the distribution team. So I got to be involved in that process. And then beyond that, you are involved in, you know, day-to-day decisions like how do we hire a crew and who are we going to hire, and you know, you have a lot of say, and I think all of those things are just make or break, and especially on a first film and a, you know, independent first film. So I think it was a really important decision, and I think for women, and especially women of color, I think it's important to step up and be a producer, especially on your early films, or, you know, just so that you have a say in all of these ways where the story can just be usurped from you essentially, or taken in a different direction. So yeah, so I think it was important. I may not do that on all my films, but I think it was important for Stray Dolls to really control as much as possible what I was trying to say and what my voice was on my first film.
Yeah.
And do you have any advice for people who are looking to start producing?
Yeah, so just start up, like focusing in just on producing and starting that, or doing producing as well as writing and directing?
Just maybe producing on their own films, or young women in particular.
Mm-hmm. We had a listener write in asking for advice on how to start a career in producing, which I think is awesome. Having like such a particular interest in that, and was wondering if you had any advice for that with your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to start producing, you can really, if you have a community of filmmakers around you or writer directors around you, I think you can start there in your community and seeing if a writer director has a short film that they would like help producing on. And, you know, I think if you start with producing short films, then there's it's highly likable. It's likely that that writer director is going to make a feature one day. So I think if you connect with a writer director as a producer and you get to produce their short film, then, you know, later in a year, maybe a few months, maybe in a couple of years, you can be the first in line to direct their feature. Produce their feature. So I think really just building relationships and starting small with shorts. I mean, I worked with the same producer who produced Love Comes Later on Stray Dolls, and in fact she became my co-writer on Stray Dolls and then also the producer on Stray Dolls. So you just, you know, make these partnerships on short films that can then carry you into features, and then you can, you know, produce an independent feature and then go on to do bigger features and keep expanding that even more.
Yeah, especially it's really good you say that about short films and people who are maybe just starting out and directing and writing, because creating your first short film is a lot of work, And having a producer there is gonna help you so much. So don't just be like, oh, I can do this on my own with this one other person. Like, no, you once you start, you're gonna want as many people as you can get. So yeah.
Exactly. And maybe you can even be part of, I mean, film schools do this really well, where, you know, you produce somebody else's film, then you write and direct a film and they produce your film. I mean, I think relying on your network and really creating kind of a family around you when it comes to film is so great and so helpful. And then that way, like, you know, if one person succeeds with something and they're building a bigger crew, suddenly they're hiring you as a producer on it, or suddenly they're hiring you to direct an episodic because they sold a show. So I think building your crew is so important. And by crew, I mean not just for your film, but like building a community around you with like-minded, sort of inspired people who want to make stories and who have a voice, and who are, you know, it doesn't matter what level of success you're at, but even if you just start forming it with people who are just playing around with stuff, I think it just grows exponentially over time.
Yeah, great advice. And with Stray Doll, something I was just recently rewatching it again, and I just always come back to how real it all feels. Like, even though, I don't know, maybe it's also with your background in like documentary work and that observance, but it just really rolls so easily. And another thing I loved was how none of the characters were perfect. There were a lot of, I don't want to necessarily say flaws, because in the environment they were in, how can you really, you know, there's a lot of nuance there. But something I really liked was I see a lot of people nowadays, if they have to write characters from like a marginalized group, where they will almost put them on a pedestal and not give them any weaknesses or any flaws. And there's no conflict, there's nothing to work on, there's no real journey there, but there was so much in Stray Dolls. How was that something that just came naturally to you, or do you ever feel the pressure of having to have perfect character, or not have the pressure of misrepresenting anyone?
I think that's such a good question, but because there is this, I mean, I think right now, if you look at the landscape of what's in the media, what's in film, well, first of all, you see that most of the directors and writer-directors are white men, right? And then you see that, like, the stories so far that we've been watching of people of color and people who are marginalized or underrepresented are all like, they fit into such a small box. And then you look at our society, and there's so many issues with socioeconomic disparity and racial inequality and gender disparity, and you start to realize that, like, we are not seeing these characters as fully human, right? Because I think a fully human person gets to have flaws as well as strengths. It gets to have weaknesses as well as, you know, things that we root for. And it's really that whole range and that whole spectrum that, unless you don't see all of it, you're not going to accept them as fully human. So they become these archetypes, right? They become these victims or these survivors or these, you know, people that we sort of feel pity for, but we don't see them as our contemporaries. We don't see them as somebody that we fully relate to. So I think in my storytelling, it's really important to create characters, and especially these characters who are people of color or from underrepresented communities, that are fully formed, that sort of, you know, they make messy human decisions just like anybody else, just like the white people we've seen doing for decades, right? They get to make those mistakes, but then they also have these redeeming things that you sometimes root for, but, you know, sometimes you don't agree with them. I think that whole push and pull is so important to, I think just to realize people as fully human, but then also to provoke your audience to, and push them to, you know, see characters that they've never seen before,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of leave them with a lot of questions about, about our world that, may not have simple answers. But I think as writers, as directors, as storytellers, it's our duty and responsibility to inspire these questions in an audience. So I feel that responsibility a lot, and I hope that there's more storytelling out there that can really take us out of these really small boxes that we've been put into up until now. And I'd like to sort of see, people of underrepresented communities just doing like all kinds of crazy roles, because unless we see that, we're never going to get to this level of sort of true equality. We're so far from it, right?
Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. Before this episode, we asked our listeners if they had any questions for you. So
if
one
you
of
want
them...
to ask us questions, go to our Instagram.
Oh, great. Well, I need to go to your Instagram and vice versa, so that we can kind of connect when all of this comes out. Yeah.
Oh, yes, definitely.
One of them wrote, I am in New York City. How do I get into the New York film scene without going to film school? Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah. I would say track down. I mean, I feel like years ago there used to be a site called Mandy.com. I don't know if it's still there, but it was the site where they would post, production assistants needed and sort of like crew needed. And I would just say to sort of find that sort of forum online, or on social media, and then, start by just being a production assistant on a set and see if you like it. And then again, start to like build that community around you from there. Like maybe you meet the writer, or maybe you meet the director, and you get to be a production manager on their next thing that they're doing. So kind of slowly taking it step by step and really building that community around you. Or I would look for entry-level positions at production companies or editing companies, and see what you like. And maybe as an assistant production person or assistant editor, maybe you can start to like meet directors and really again start to build that community and go from there. So I think there are ways to do it. I didn't do a grad film program, and I didn't do a very formal film thing. I just did like a little bit at Tisch, but yeah, you can find ways. I mean, now there's social media, so there's so much. I mean, even following you guys on Instagram, or following, I think a whole set of young people who are like trying to make films could be a great way to just like, start hanging out together and working together, basically.
I'm pretty sure Mandy is in the UK as well, because I have a feeling I once signed up for that.
I have it. I'm signed up for it.
Yeah, we'll link it. We'll link it down below then, so people can go check it out. Because yeah, there's so many great websites where you can just write. Even if you don't have experience, skills that you have, a lot of skills transfer into different positions, and it is that evil cycle of, oh, you need to have experience to get experience in that. But even then, you can just maybe start doing something on your own and then say that you have experience in that and just slowly build on it.
Exactly. And everybody needs a driver on set. So like, you just be like, I can drive, and like somebody will hire you, I mean, you're not, the truth is, in this industry, you're not going to get hired immediately to be a director, or even to be an editor or a cinematographer. You really have to kind of prove that you've been doing it for a while for people to then hire you. That's the only thing. But I think it's worth learning to get to that point, because the more you put yourself in different crew positions, and the more, I PA'd, I've assistant edited, I've edited, the more you kind of know these different roles, the stronger you will be as a writer director. So it's almost good to take on those roles and just drive the crew around, just so you know everybody.
Yeah, it's really important to remember that It is only people with family in these industries who start out right away. Like, don't, like, you've heard about
Yeah.
Matt Damon, but, you know, just look into his family and you'll find out the truth. So
what happened to what's his family connection?
well, they're just I've just now I have to look it up because I
But at least with, yeah, you're right. At least with, like, you know, Sofia Coppola or something. Yeah. But she's also an incredible director, so you can't really.
Yeah, but also just now you can go on IMDb and you can see where all the directors started out first and all of their work, and it is just, you know, take all the stairs. And we have another question from Hannah, and she asks, other than watching films, what is something a young aspiring filmmaker can do during COVID?
Yeah, so much. You can listen to interviews. I love, like, Hollywood Reporter does this, like, roundtable. They do actor roundtable, cinematographer roundtables. I watch that endlessly. I read articles. I read books. There's so many, like, director biographies that are really great. Like Sidney Lumet has a biography, which is, or not biography, but it's like on directing, like a book on directing. And I love his book. Elia Kazan has a really good book that goes into performances. There's this thing called Masterclass. I don't know if you guys know that.
Excellent. Oh,
amazing. I mean, they have everything. They have, like, Natalie Portman is teaching you acting, and, you know, Samuel L. Jackson is, I mean, I would just take all of that, because it's also just so important to learn, like, what actors do, what actors go through, what, you know, what writers go through. So just, I think there's so much online, especially on YouTube, and it's inexhaustible. Oh, and then podcasts too. There's one of my favorite podcasts is Off Camera. It's with Sam Shepard. It's right, Sam. I think Sam Shepard, but it's so great. And then there's also the DGA podcast, which is great. And they interview directors. It's like inexhaustible resources now. Yeah. You don't need film school at all.
No, you don't. You got so many things. This would be, like, perfect if we had, like, sponsorship for Masterclass or anything. What I will say about Masterclass is, for anyone who isn't, even if you're not acting, Natalie Portman's acting class. Amazing. It's something so important that's really underrated as a filmmaker, is understanding the acting process, like understanding how to communicate with the actors and all that is so important. So if anyone's interested in that, Natalie Portman is amazing and so insightful.
Yeah. Oh, it's incredible. She's amazing. But also I would say, I mean, even with COVID, like, a friend of mine was doing improv classes on Zoom. But I just think, like, stuff like that is all great for writing, for directing. Like, the more random stuff you know, the better. If you know improv, great. Like, I think it'll help you with pacing and timing and what to say when the whole crew is really tense and mad at you. You know, just, I think all of that sort of will take you on that path.
I've been joining this writers group on Zoom. And that's something most cities, most small areas will have writers groups that you can join as well, where you just share your writing and talk about it. A lot of them are doing Zoom meetings, and that's a really good way to have other people give you feedback, as well as reading other people's work and connecting with them. So that's a really good way, especially if you're feeling a bit lonely, then just having, like, an organized meeting every week is a really good thing, and also keeps you going in your writing and motivated. So that's something I'd encourage people to look for.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then also you can download screenplays of, you know, all the sort of, like, Oscar-winning screenplays are all just online. So I love, what I love doing is, like, downloading a script that I haven't seen, and I read it, and then I imagine, like, how I would direct it, and then I watch the movie to be like, oh, that's how Ridley Scott directed it, you know, and then you kind of, like, compare notes. So I love doing that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've been loving reading scripts. I have a website and we'll link it down below if anyone. It's got most movies and that, so you can go check that out because it's really cool to read the scripts and see where it was, what happened, scenes that maybe got cut out and stuff like that. It's really interesting. And yeah.
So many directors started off writing. Like Kurosawa was just like a writer for years until they let him direct one of his own scripts. So a lot of people say writing and then editing are just so key to like then knowing how to direct.
I mean, Greta Gerwig, she was writing for how many years, you know?
Yeah, she went to school for playwriting, yeah.
So we always ask just at the end of the episode about a woman or women. It's always women because it's never just one who inspires you, whether that's in your professional or personal life. Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to?
Wow. I mean, there's so many again. I mean, I'd say my mom. I mean, I think a lot of us will say that, but you know, I think she was so ambitious and was so career driven. And even now I look to her for just so much strength and inspiration and encouragement. So she still continues to inspire me. She's in fact starting to write too. She's a doctor, but started writing later on, like just a few years ago in her life. And she's just this amazing like closet writer. So again, she's just a source of inspiration constantly. But in terms of directors, I will say one of my favorite directors is Jane Campion, who did The Piano, which is one of my favorite films. You know, I just think, again, her female characters are so flawed and so strong and yet so messy and so human. And yeah, the worlds that she builds around these characters are just also so immersive and so layered. So she's one of my favorites that I can just at any point go back to one of her films and feel really like all inspired. But actually a recent female director that I recently watched, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And Celine Sciamma, I might be saying her last name wrong, but she's like brilliant filmmaker. So so that film, you know, recently I was like, like I feel so inspired now to kind of go out there and do something really unique and dynamic. So, but so many out there.
Yeah, no, Celine is amazing. All of her work is just chef's kiss.
It's just divine. Yeah.
Before we go, is there anything you want to say to any woman out there listening right now, who's looking to get, just searching for something? Is there any message?
I would say like stay hungry and restless and keep searching. I mean, even if it's not this one thing, but keep following your instincts and sort of keep doing something small that sort of takes you to what you're searching for, so that, you know, it just keeps growing. Yeah. So are you able to tell me like where this will all live and all of that, or?
Yeah, so we will put the audio on all major podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google, and then we'll put the video on YouTube, and that's all going to be Friday next week. So yeah, we'll make sure we'll post on Instagram, tag you, I'll go follow you as well, and so yeah.
Okay, great. Well, this is
so
really
great.
Fun, you guys.
Thank you for talking with us.
Yeah, what a great idea. Thank you for thinking of me and letting me blabber on. So thanks.
No, you've honestly been so insightful. I'll make sure to just cut that bit out. But where can people find you? Is there anything you want to plug or promote?
Stray Dolls, that's my recent feature. It's on Amazon Prime and Apple and probably YouTube and Vudu and all these platforms. It'd be great if people check it out. It's you know, this incredible cast of Gitanjali Thapa, Olivia De Jong, and Cynthia Nixon. independent filmmaking. It's like female writer directors and female writer director, but also like behind the camera, we were a lot of women, and in front of as well. And then yeah, just I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. If people want to reach out, I'm around. I'm totally reachable. So.
That's awesome. I also think Stray Dolls, if you're in the US, it's free with your Prime subscription. So anyone, please go watch it. It's excellent, and you will not regret it. Yeah.
Oh, great! Thank you so much.